What does it take to build something from nothing? To bet on yourself, figure it out as you go, and turn an idea into something real. Welcome to KU Hustle, the podcast featuring the entrepreneurs and innovators who bleed crimson and blue. These are their stories in their own words. I'm your host, Jessica Palm, and this is KU Hustle. On the show today, we have Kansas City-based fine artist, a KU alum, and quite possibly the only person on the planet who has painted a Jayhawk using actual limestone and then sold it for $150,000. We are talking about Megh Knappenberger. She is one of the only artists ever licensed by KU, has done commissions for major corporate clients, including American Century Investments, and has trusted to create art with more than 30 carats of real diamonds. But before that, a significant event changed her perspective and her career. Today, we're going to dig into all of it, the business, the brushes, and what KU had to do with making it happen. Megh, welcome to KU Hustle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Well, we always start here. We're just going to dig into it. How did you find your way to KU?
Well, I grew up in St. Louis, and I was always an art kid. I knew I wanted to do something creative, and my cousin had come to KU and graduated from the design program, so I just kind of followed in his footsteps to do, the commercially acceptable way to be an artist, which was to be a graphic designer.
Okay, so design is something that runs in your family, clearly. Mm-hmm. And what drew you to graphic design specifically as a freshman?
Well, I had always painted on the side, or, since I was 12 years old, I had painted, and I knew I wanted to do something creative. But when I was, a little 18-year-old, I think I didn't believe that being an artist was a real job. And I don't think most of the world still believes it's a real job. Mm-hmm. So going into graphic design was a way of taking that and then turning it into something that I could do, as a professional.
That's amazing. I think as you spend your time learning your craft within the university and your professional school, there's always like a moment in the curriculum where you feel like it all clicks. When was that moment for you, or was there a specific class that you really enjoyed that made you think, okay, I can take my love of art and graphic design and blend it together?
I think as I got further into the graphics program, I was probably a junior or a senior, we were getting more into creating like a full brand for somebody. So before that, we were learning the basics and the essentials of design. And then this was where we got to actually do some of the real work that we would do. And we learned how to research the background on something and how to make a brand that felt meaningful and how it reflected the history of the person or the business, or, oftentimes we were just creating a business out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And I had always loved history and research, and, like all kids of the 80s loved Indiana Jones. I kind of loved that like treasure hunting thing, and still do. And I think that idea of getting to make something creative but have it have real meaning and mm-hmm. Have it be weighted in something, that really, really clicked with me. And that's something that, I learned here, and I still very much do today.
The why,
mm-hmm.
the story.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so let's dig into your story a little bit. Take us back to right after graduation. What did you think you were going to do with your graphic design degree, your life? Like, you've got that moment in front of you. You're walking down the hill. What is Megh doing? Where are you going?
Megh is moving to Chicago. So right after graduation, I wanted to move there. A lot of Midwestern kids, I think, move to Kansas City after they graduate from school. And so I started interviewing with a few places. I graduated feeling incredibly ambitious. I've always been really ambitious. I wanted to work at the best design firms. I wanted to be published in the magazines. I wanted what I think every young designer wants.
Chasing the dream.
Exactly. And so I began interviewing kind of all over the place, and then went to Chicago for an interview with a small design firm. And at the time, there was this guy who I had gone through the design program at KU with. He was working there, and I called him, and I ended up getting that job, and we worked together for a few years and became really close friends. And then, fast forward, it's like 24 years now. We got married. We had a couple of babies. So the origins of my family and my career here in Lawrence, and I think that has a big thing to do with why it's, so rosy to me here.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love a good love story.
I know our friends and family, when we started dating, finally said, oh my God, finally.
Finally. So you spent some time in Chicago and you were working as a designer at a firm. And then were you working on consumer brands when you were designing at that firm? And then what pivoted you to more of like food and consumer facing products that then launched you into your own firm?
Yeah. Well, I worked at the first firm for a few years, and I think like many first jobs, it wasn't the greatest. And, I didn't love my boss. I'm trying to be kind here, but I think many first jobs, I had this, like I said, this like big raging ambition coming out of school. And then I was doing, not work that I really expected to be doing.
You mean you weren't lit up every day?
No, I was doing a lot of grunt work basically.
Yeah.
And that's what you do when you're a young designer and you kind of learn the ropes. And it was just time for me to move on. And so I started interviewing around, and I landed at Potbelly Sandwich Works, which aesthetically really better aligned with my style. It's really rooted in kind of like a quirky antique store. And so that's something I've always been really interested in, like antiques and old books and history and things like that.
The story. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I was there, I was able to go out to, they had this like big warehouse, and it's where they kept all of the materials for building the elements for the store. So at the time, they probably still do this quite a bit, but they hand built every table. They built all the artwork and the menu boards. And so I went over there with a flatbed scanner and my laptop, and I was just, hulking anything I could up onto the scanner, like pieces of wood and old pieces of wallpaper and texture and tin tiles, and, just creating this whole library of visual elements that we could take from the walls and the floors and then put into the visual library for the brand. And so I was able to kind of better do the art thing and the design thing together there and build this library of, kind of like collage-based marketing. We were still selling sandwiches to people at the end of the day.
That's cool though, because you were able to take like the essence of the physical space and incorporate that into the feeling that people have when they see that brand in its own unique kind of quirky way. Was there a project when you were there that you loved the most?
Well, it was pretty cyclical, brands like that kind of go around the yearly calendar of like Mother's Day and Father's Day. And it's kind of, working on the same theme kind of over and over again. So I would say, kind of building that library and then having the opportunity, which actually happened after I left, to write the brand book for them and say, so this is what we have. Here's the whole library. Here's how to use it. Here's all the pieces. And this is the instruction manual for somebody else to be able to put it together. And that was really cool because that's something I pulled forward into when I began doing my own work, working for myself.
So what was that feeling, and when did you know it was time to bet on yourself and do something for yourself and leave that corporate environment, agency environment with design?
Well, really practically put, it was right after I got married. And having health insurance was that one little piece of security that I needed to feel safe enough to do it. And so that was a big part of it. But all along, I knew I was going to work for myself someday. I had grown up with the privilege of living in a house where my parents ran a small business. I'm third generation entrepreneur on both sides.
Wow.
So my whole family and my whole life has kind of revolved around people running their own businesses. And it's a special thing to get to see that and see that it's possible. It's real, you know, you can make a real living. And that was always the kind of ultimate end game for me. So it was kind of a matter of time. And yeah, health insurance. And it was like, and then I think just not really knowing what I was getting myself into other than like, I'm going to work for myself. It's going to be great.
I'm going to figure it out. I think that there's, when I talk with entrepreneurs, there's always this, and being one myself, the terrifying feeling of it being an entrepreneur really isn't terrifying. It's excitement and it's fuel, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've got this, I'll figure it out. I'm comfortable with the uncertainty and finding that edge of what is that push point, right? And for you, it's insurance. For others, it's, you know, maybe their business plan or having the right investor. But that's interesting that you come from a family of entrepreneurs, so it's not a new concept to you. So tell us a little bit about the business that you launched. It was called Fairgrounds, correct? What inspired the name and what is the origin story of the firm?
Well, when I left Potbelly, I had my network of people were all in the kind of like fast casual restaurant space. So like many industries, it was sort of insular. As people left, they went to other similar businesses. And so over time, you know, those were the people I knew, and that was the work that I knew. And so it kind of made sense for me to go from Potbelly into working with other restaurants. And honestly, I love food. I love the people. I love, you know, it's a creative, kind of like parallel creative thing, chefs and cooks and restaurants. So that was kind of where, you know, why I launched into that. And from there, so Fairgrounds, it's Fare. That was like the, you know, the reason for that name.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you're trucking along, you're married, you have your company, you're working with amazing clients, and then you have a change in perspective. So what happened that made you shift from, okay, I'm doing graphic design, to like really going all in on what you're passionate about?
Yeah. Well, I was pretty far along in the business, and I think I had gotten to a place where I was working with a celebrity chef. I was doing really good work, really meaningful work. I was getting paid well. I had a couple of part-time employees, and I also at this time had my son, who was our first child. And when he was about a year old, I hurt my back. And at first it was like, you know, I kept kind of working through it and ignoring it. And it just started to like slowly fold in on itself. And the business, you know, I was trying to kind of take some time off, and then it all of the sudden it was like, I couldn't work. I couldn't lift my son. I was in so much pain. I couldn't really do anything.
It's horrible, yeah.
And so the whole business just kind of, it had to close. All the people had to go. I was in kind of a pseudo partnership that had to dissolve. All the clients, and you know, at the time I had spent, this was my dream. You know, I had built this
It's like
thing.
a child.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a kind of a nightmare to both be releasing this thing I had worked so hard to build, and also be experiencing this physical thing that was kind of like forcing me to do that. But it came to a point where I had no other choice but to do that. So I, you know, folded it all down, and then I just had to take some time to recover and heal. And while I was doing that, I could basically be laying down or standing up. And so while I was standing, I started painting again a little more. You know, I had painted earlier on, and then I had kind of like stopped doing that when I became a designer in Chicago, and traded that in for doing freelance work. And so I was doing that on the side to supplement my, like, you know, meager intro
The
designers.
grind, right? You gotta, keep it moving. Yeah.
Salary at first. So I hadn't really been painting that much. And as I started to do that while I was recovering, and then as I was kind of ready to start going back to work, I just wasn't feeling excited about starting the design thing back up again. And I would not consider it a huge crash and burn for that career or anything other than it ran its course for me. And the book closed and I was ready to do something else. And I think we're kind of expected to go to school and, pick the thing that we're going to do for the rest of our lives. And it's not the case for most people that they want to continue pursuing that one thing. I think we all have many different versions of ourselves, and sometimes life forces us to find them. In my case, it did. But as I look back, the book closed. I'm so grateful for that. Everything good about that career has come right along with me into this one.
That's such amazing perspective, and frankly, a mindset that I feel like as an entrepreneur you have to have, right?
Yeah.
That you're chasing the opportunity, the big idea, you're hustling, you're making it happen, but you're also thinking about how it affects you personally. And we all have to take a minute, right? It's the cliche of you have to take care of yourself to take care of others, and your body said it's time. And instead of taking that as a moment of defeat or a moment of,
I was defeated pretty hard for a little while there.
Okay, to be real. But looking back on it now, it happened because it was the right thing.
Yeah.
And your mindset around that now is how it served its purpose. And that's also, I think, a tenet of, innovating and iterating and being a work in progress. And we're all just doing what we can.
Yeah.
And the next idea, big concept, chasing our next dream, that's all good stuff, right? And things that we should embrace and think about. So it's not a small thing you had part-time employees, you had really great clients, you were working on cool stuff. You're grieving that, right? And taking a moment to step back. And then now you're diving into your art, and a lot has happened between shuttering your design firm and launching a whole other career. And now you're a fine artist, and you say that paintings light you up, but you've also shared that what drives you and what you've talked about throughout our talk today is storytelling and connection. And so from your work, what are some of the favorite stories you've captured? I mean, you've done some incredible art. So do you have any ones that have really resonated with you or stuck out the most?
Wow. It's a little bit like children. I love them all. And in the moment of any project, I am so deeply in on it and love it. And it's the most important thing to me at that time. So it's a little hard to choose because of that. But I mean, I have to, especially because I'm here today, I have to say it was the first 6 Jayhawks, because those pieces were really what made it possible for me to make a real career out of being a painter, because they came at a moment when, I had started, kind of come back from the brink and healed and started painting full time. And I had, I think it's important to talk about the real logistics and money aspects of this, because
the business side.
Yeah, because I think, there's this dreamy, I just leapt when I knew it was right. And yes, and that, that's not really always how it goes.
Yeah, you also have to bring in income to sustain your lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. So, I closed down that business and I had about $30,000 in the bank.
Okay.
And I said to myself, at the time my husband was a designer, I was still contributing meaningfully to our partnership. So it was not as if I could stop working forever, nor did I want to. And so I said, when this money runs out, if and when, then it was a good try. The bar is so low. No one expects this to work. Being a painter for my life is laughable to everyone. So it's kind of the expectations were so low that it was I can just try this thing. And
was there a part of you though that was kind of I'm betting on me?
Yeah, I mean, completely.
Okay.
I was it felt to me from the outside, everyone was looking at it oh, go have your fun.
She's a creative.
Yeah, she's a kooky painter.
Yeah.
This isn't no one expected it to work, but I think it was harder to leap and launch into this career than it was into design because I knew so much about what it took to run a business.
Right.
And I also knew very deeply that this is what I want to do. And so if this doesn't work, this is going to crush me in a way that it would have been different if the design hadn't worked.
Right.
And
right. You're going all in on it, and
Yeah.
it's your lifeblood passion. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty scary, but I started working, I tinkered, I made things, and then I made the 6 Jayhawks, and I did run out of money in spectacularly dramatic fashion in the 2 weeks that I was waiting to find out if I had gotten approval from KU licensing. So I was so all in on that project that I had 29 cents in my bank account. And
Oh my gosh.
this is in my business checking account.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that 30,000 had the time between that and there was a little less than a year. It was probably 9 months. And so I had made some money, but not enough.
Right.
And so, the thing that was the scariest was what am I going to do when I run out of money? That's what I thought would be the scariest. But then I did get the licensing, and then
You're oh no.
and then it was oh my God. So now I have to sell these. Now I have to figure out how to make prints, how to fulfill them. What are all and that time was actually somehow more just kind of this combination of exciting and scary.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if this doesn't work, then I am really screwed.
That's such an interesting perspective, though, because it's the difference of working in the business and on the business, and the art and putting all of your time and passion into these beautiful pieces of work and banking on such an incredible partnership. But then okay, I get it. And now what? Now I have to do marketing and communications and selling and that's a whole other level that's working on your business for the continued growth so that the next project can come.
Yeah.
And showing proof of concept to the partners that you have,
Yeah.
like the university. So, okay, so you've worked with Jayhawks. You've painted our girl Taylor, who we all love in the region. You've commissioned pieces with large organizations. You have collector's editions, and you have a specific process that you go through when you're doing a project. And talk to us a little bit about that process, because it feeds into that storytelling that you were talking about earlier.
Well, it all starts with research for me. I get very deep into it, and I just love it. I go deeper than is necessary just because I'm interested.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a commission for a private collector where I'm exploring their favorite musician or a family member who passed, or something that's really highly personal to them, or something like Taylor, whose entire life is accessible to me. So I get into the details of it, and that really, for me, helps to figure out what I want the piece to feel like, what colors I will use, what, if it's a person or a portrait, what pose are they in? Are they facing front? Are there, all of those little decisions are really, really important in the way the piece feels and the way it reflects what the collector wants it to feel like. And the way I find that is through doing research. And if it's for someone specifically, I'll sit down and have a conversation like this, where I'll ask questions, and mostly I'll just sit and listen, and people will tell stories about their life and why this person or place or thing or whatever they've asked me to paint, why it's meaningful to them. And there's always something in that meeting where they just say a thing off the cuff, and it's that's the thing. And it happens every single time. It gives me goosebumps just to think about it.
I love that. It's the spark of
Yeah.
the idea and the inspiration.
Yeah, I wish I'm working on a piece right now that's a surprise, and I don't know when this is coming out, so I can't say it.
We'll keep it under wraps for now.
But it's the best example of that just something was said in passing in the conversation, and that became like the core of the piece.
Okay, we'll have to have you back once it's live. Yeah. Okay, so I have to ask, because I was also doing some recon and checking out your site, and what is your connection? You have special edition right now with Jerry. Mm-hmm. So what inspired you to do that work?
Well, that was a commission for a private collector. So this was somebody who loves the Grateful Dead, loves Jerry Garcia. And so that was really fun to get into the research on. One of the reasons, because my brother is a huge Dead fan. And so one of my interview subjects was actually my brother, who sat down and told me all of these really interesting things about, you know, you think about the Dead as just like a bunch of drug, you know, stoners and doing LSD and, you know, that, yes, was happening. But also they were doing all of this really cool experimental work. They were trying to figure out like the very best possible way to make a concert sound good. And there's this whole sound engineering thing about them. And so doing like experimental editions was a big part of that because of that experimentation in their brand.
That's fascinating. So similar to your work in experimentation, so part of your art that you've done for the university has limestone in it. Mm-hmm. What inspired that? That's a very specific thing to incorporate, obviously an affinity to the university, but what was that like to figure out how to use it and incorporate it into your pieces?
I mean, first of all, I would say like everything as an entrepreneur, it's like an idea, you can't take an idea to the bank. Like ideas are fine, but it's like figuring out how to make an idea happen. You just figure it out. And that is like the thesis of my whole career and probably every entrepreneur's career.
Everything is figure outable.
You just have an idea and then, you know, and then you go like, I don't know, maybe I'll do this. And so when I was working on those pieces, I had always, and especially early on when I was younger, I worked with a lot of like old books and papers, and I would do a lot more collage work where I would pull like postcards and things into the piece. And so I had done a lot of work like that in the past where I had incorporated other things like unconventional materials that aren't paint onto the canvas. And then when I was working on the Jayhawks, I was doing the research and just thinking about the origins of the rock chalk chant. And then it's like, God, like I've never seen rock chalk. I've never felt rock chalk in my hands. And this is such a huge part of the lore here.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, I wonder what it is. And I wonder if I could get some. And then I found myself in a quarry like a week later, digging some up and feeling it with my hands.
We're going to figure it out. It's going to be great.
Just made some calls and, you know, people, especially at the beginning, but now I think in always, I have just kind of reached out and asked and been like, hey, do you know somebody who has a quarry? And in my case, I had a friend whose dad had a quarry and like, great, can I come out there and poke around?
always cashing in on connections, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all who we know.
You never know.
Okay, so you designed the original 6. They had the limestone in it. How was this used? So you're licensed with the university. What kind of person bought your art? And it sold for $150,000. Did you expect it to sell for that right out of the gate?
Yes. I wouldn't have set the price as that if I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't believe they were worth that, why would anyone else believe that?
I love that. I love just like standing in your value and having the confidence to know this is the work of my art. This is my craft. And I know what it's worth and how others should value it too.
I mean, it was still a scary process, and I was a new artist, and I think there's a lot of unspoken rules and many spoken rules that we unconsciously take in, like, oh, well, I need to, you know, do X, Y, Z before I can ask for more money, or somebody needs to tell me I can charge this much, and I knew the value of these pieces. They were going to be the only 6 Jayhawks I ever painted. They were going to be reproduced, you know, forever. Even after I am gone, they will be reproduced. It's in our family estate planning that my intellectual property will go. And so I knew I just felt that I knew they were meaningful, important, and the originals themselves were highly valuable because of that. And I mean, it was scary, and at the time it took for them to sell, it took a little bit. But when they did, and I, of course, insisted on one person buying all 6 of them.
Of course. I mean,
which is also ill-advised because I was having people interested in buying one or the other. And it was like, oh, I really want them to go as a collection. And
yeah, it was your vision.
yeah.
Yeah.
And after they had been out for a little while, I had a full-page article in the Star, and they sold later that night. So it's,
Oh my gosh.
you know this too, like the great power of PR
Yeah.
and telling the story about the piece and how I had incorporated the limestone and, just like pulling people into the process so they weren't just like, oh, cool, 6 Jayhawks. It was like, this whole thing with it. And then that was like what made it happen.
Have you stayed connected to the collector?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you get
We're
to
friends.
see your stuff?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think that's like the best part when you get to see how special it is for someone and
Yes.
in their environment where they're with it every day. And
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the number one reason that I sell directly to people rather than like in a gallery model, you sell, they sell your work and they keep the relationship with the collector. And I think that's so crazy because having somebody's art in your home is so intimate
personal,
and
so
personal. And I want to know the people, not, so I can exploit them or anything. It's like, I genuinely want to know their stories. I want to hear about, they move and they need help. Like, how do we pack these up and move them to a new place? And so that ongoing connection is great. And especially like with the KU tie, I've connected to Jayhawks all over the world. I get emails from people, who are overseas and they brought their Jayhawks with them. And I mean, it's so, so cool and special to connect to people who love the same thing that I love for their own reasons.
I think it's incredible the power of the Jayhawk and that affinity globally and that personal relationship that you get to have with all of these individuals because they've seen your work or they've read the articles or they feel like they know you from social media. And so for you to get to have some of that relationship with them after they buy one of your pieces, which has been so personal to you as you're creating it, is incredible and special. I know that community is a big thing for you and something that you care deeply about. And you give back to several nonprofits, including the ACLU, the Steps of Faith Foundation, GIFT, which is generating income for tomorrow. And in 2021, you launched the Knappenberger Family Fund with your husband. What inspired you to do that with the university?
I read when GIFT first began, or when I first became aware of them, which was like around 2020, I read their slogan, which I'm going to probably butcher, but it's like, if 100,000 people gave $10 a month. And it was kind of posed as a question, like, if this happened, what could we do? And in their case, it was like investing in underinvested areas east of Troost in Kansas City. Like, what would happen if that money came in? And I think I had this idea, like many people, that giving back or even starting a foundation required, like old trust fund money. And,
Infinite dollars.
yeah, and just, like, I don't think most of us are sitting around every day thinking like, I got all this extra money. Like, what am I going to do with it? Who am I going to give it to?
Right.
And so it just made me think like, well, I could give them $10 a month. Like, I could give them more than that. And why not start a fund here at KU with a small amount of money? And especially, that came about as I was kind of winding down the collector's edition of the Jayhawks, which were print sets. And I wanted to do something special with the last set because it really kind of like closed the loop on so many things in such a beautiful way that I wanted to let that give back. And so I auctioned that off, and we started the fund with only $5,000. And I mean, KU Endowment probably doesn't open that many $5,000 checks per day. Maybe they do, I don't know. But they were so open to, I was afraid to call and say, I would like to start a fund, but like, I only have this much money. Like I honestly felt that way, and I was absolutely not received in that way at all. They were so excited and like, yes, let's do this. And
Yeah.
even though the amount is small relative to many other funds, what it has done, specifically it's at the School of Fine Arts, and it's to help students be able to stay in a class that they would have otherwise dropped because the materials costs were so high. And that has had a meaningful small
That's significant.
impact. Yeah.
That is significant. And $5,000 is real money for a lot of people, and especially a student, right? And if
Yeah.
a student is struggling because of the material cost, you're lowering that barrier to entry and helping shape their opportunity to launch and do something really exciting with their career after school. So,
Yeah. I mean, paint is expensive.
yes.
And ceramics and, jewelry making supplies are really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an idea and you want to try and figure out how to make it, it's helpful if you can have some help with the materials.
So you have this amazing fund. You are obviously very well connected and stayed close to the university. So before we let you go, I'm going to end with a question I love because the responses are always so surprising. If you could go back and sit with yourself at the very start of your time at KU and you don't know anything yet about your path, what would you tell her? What would you tell her? What would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to document it, write much more, and keep a journal, and just, enjoy the ride, but write it down.
I love that. That story. Create the story. Meg, thanks so much for being here today. What strikes me the most about Meg's story isn't the licensing deal or the incredible success of her art. It's the part that came before any of it. It's her bravery. The moment she closed a business, she built from scratch because something truer was calling her forward. That took courage. And I think a lot of founders and creators listening to this know exactly that kind of moment and what it feels like. If you want to see Meg's work, and I really think you should, head to meghmakesart.com and follow her on socials. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's right in the middle of their own winding entrepreneurial journey. I'm Jessica Palm, and this is KU Hustle. Rock Chalk.